Welcome to Fresh Food Therapy again. Today, we're going to be doing a little bit of a challenge. If you go to a restaurant and you order a bottle of wine, it's not unusual in this day and age that you're paying $30 to $40 for just the bottle of wine. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to take the budget for that bottle of wine and we're going to turn it into a meal that you prepare at home. Restaurant quality, very sexy, with a bottle of wine for $35 or less. Are you ready? Okay, so we have all of the ingredients and we're pretty much ready to start prepping. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start by making the prep work for the mashed potatoes. You're gonna take just a few potatoes, just enough to make 2 nice sized servings on the plate. And we're gonna take the Vidalia Chop Wizard and we're going to take the potatoes and we're gonna process them to go through the Chop Wizard. Now, if you are an individual that doesn't like to multitask and likes to keep things very simple, there is nothing that says you can't take a package of instant mashed potatoes and just boil some water and add the water to the mashed potatoes. That will cut down the time and the energy for this, and they also make some phenomenal flavors. So depending on what you're making, it's all right to cheat and get yourself a $1.50 package of instant mashed potatoes. We're gonna cube the potatoes. Now you can also, if you wish, roast the potatoes. If you're gonna roast the potatoes, you cut them into bite-sized pieces. We'll once again boil them. And then once they're almost done, they're just tender, we will rub them with a little bit of butter and herbs and put them in the oven to just finish. But this is now full and that's perfect for making the potatoes that we want. Next is asparagus. Asparagus tends to be a little expensive, but you can usually find it inexpensive during the summer months. What you want is you want about 7 or 8 fronds per person. Cut off the bottom, and what we're gonna do is we're going to just put those to the side and prep them in a second. We're gonna take the mushrooms, for the burgundy sauteed mushrooms, we're gonna cut them in half. Now, the portion of mushrooms may look a little bit big for 2 people. I am here to tell you that mushrooms have a tendency to shrink down tremendously. So always start with more mushrooms than you think you need, and you'll be surprised at how much is the perfect amount. Now, to make burgundy sauteed mushrooms, we're gonna cheat. Most people are not necessarily up on the wines of France. And in Burgundy, there's 2 major grapes that they use. They use Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So today, when we make the burgundy sauteed mushrooms, we're gonna use a little bit of the Pinot Noir that we're gonna be drinking with the meal, which guarantees that it'll pair a little bit better. And we're gonna cook it down with that and a little bit of butter, and you should have perfect mushrooms for the steak. We're introducing a new tool today. It's called a mandolin. And the mandolin is really just a sharp blade that has an adjustable length. It can either julienne or slice with different sizes and different textures. What we're gonna do is we're going to prep the onion today by cutting the top and the bottom off and then peeling the layer that we won't be using off. And then we're gonna process it with the mandolin today. And you're gonna see how quick and how easy this is. Now, the mandolin is very specialized, and it does require a little bit of cleaning when you're done with it. But if you're doing an outside barbecue, you're making hamburgers and hot dogs, the mandolin can be used to prep onions and tomatoes in seconds for large groups. We have it on the thin slice today, and what we're going to do is we're gonna take the onion, place it on, put the handle for safety reasons on, and then we're gonna begin to slice. And it goes as fast as this. Now when you look underneath, what you end up with is razor thin slices of onions that are ready to be sauteed. When you go to make sauteed caramelized onions for the steak, these onions will cook up so fast and so easily, you're gonna wish that you had a mandolin months and months and months ago. Okay, now that we have the onions prepped, the mushrooms prepped, and the asparagus ready to prep, we're gonna prep the second phase of the asparagus. Literally all you have to do is take a baking sheet, spray a little Pam on it, once the asparagus is laid out in a thin layer, this is where the magic happens. We're going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil over the top, and then we're going to take a little bit of Progresso Italian style breadcrumbs, and we're just gonna sprinkle a little bit, literally just about 2 or 3 tablespoons. Once you've done that, we're gonna take a little bit of Parmesan and Romano cheese and sprinkle it also. Just the thinnest of coats. And then a little bit of black pepper. You now have the asparagus completely ready to go, and all you have to do is put it in the oven at about 350 for about 12 minutes. And it should be tender, it should be ready to go and ready to plate. So what we're going to do first is we're going to prep the mushrooms. They're very, very quick and they're not trouble at all. What we're going to do is we're going to take a small pat of butter, maybe about a tablespoon, and we're going to put it into the fry pan, and we're going to coat the pan. Once the fry pan is completely coated, we're going to put the mushrooms in, and they will start to cook down immediately. So it's very, very quick. Mushrooms into the pan. Now we're gonna let them cook for a little bit just to soften. And then what we're going to do is we're gonna add a splash of wine. Not too little because you won't get much flavor, not too much because then you'll have too little to drink. Now, it's completely optional, but if you would like, it is perfectly acceptable to take a little bit of liquid smoke and to put it into the mushrooms while they cook. Literally 1 drop or 2 drops will make a savory difference to the burgundy sauteed mushrooms. When the mushrooms start cooking down, we will have them look moist. That's the sign that they're starting to give off a little bit of their moisture and they're starting to cook down. When they are at the point where they all look like they're starting to get cooked, that's when we're gonna add a little bit of pepper and a little bit of the burgundy, or the Pinot Noir in this case. Okay, we're about ready to start with adding the Pinot Noir. And you're literally gonna just put in about an ounce or 2. And again, if you'd like, a little bit of liquid smoke. We're gonna add a pinch of pepper. And the mushrooms should be ready to put to the side. Now the next step is the onions. And the onions are not as easy as the mushrooms, but they're pretty easy. It just takes a little bit more time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a little bit of vegetable oil and we're gonna put it in the pan. Just enough to coat the bottom. And now we're gonna take those beautifully thinly sliced pieces of onion and we're gonna lay them in the pan. You're gonna wanna coat them with the oil evenly and spread the onions out so that they cook down fast and easy and evenly. As onions cook down, they actually start to crystallize their sugars. They become sweet and savory. They're wonderful as an addition to most cooking dishes, but if you put them over just a grilled steak, they're absolutely delicious. Completely optional once again. If you'd like, you can take a little bit of the garlic salt and sprinkle it over the onion. It adds a little bit of depth to the flavor of a caramelized onion, but just a little bit. It will take about 7 to 8 minutes for the onions to cook down. You'll know that they're ready when they're starting to brown just a little bit. They're soft and they start to show a little bit of texture. So we've let them cook for a little while and they're getting to a beautiful point of caramelization. If you can see, you're looking at it just being lightly browned and soft. So what we're gonna do is we're now gonna transfer those into the bowl and we're ready to go with the onions. Now, this is where it starts getting really cagey. And that means you have to pay closer attention and you have to put more focus in. Now that you have the mushrooms and the onions done, we're gonna start moving to the protein. When you are cooking protein, it tends to be much more expensive and it also has a chance to be overcooked or undercooked. So we're gonna leave as much time and focus on this as you need. Cook at a medium heat. Don't rush yourself. It's gonna be easy. We got this. So we're going to take a little bit of the garlic butter, the compound butter that we made in one of the earlier episodes, and we're gonna put it into the fry pan. The fact that there's a little bit of oil in the fry pan from the onion process, not a problem at all. In fact, it'll add a little bit of flavor and a little bit of depth to the dish. Now that the garlic butter is in the pan and heating up, we're gonna take the shrimp that we're going to serve. These are raw, but they're peeled. So they're very easy to work with. All we're gonna do is literally put them into the pan and spread them out. Now, if you were making a true shrimp scampi, you could add a little bit of fresh lemon juice, you could add a little bit of capers, a little extra garlic, a little bit of roasted pimento, numerous other items to add flavor and color and depth to the dish. But in this case, what we're gonna do is just a very, very light garlic scampi butter. Shrimp are very delicate. If you'd like, you can add a little bit of salt, you can add a little bit of pepper, but what I'm going to suggest is that because shrimp are delicate and sweet, you want to leave them to give off their own flavor. You want them to be as true to form as possible. So that means a lot less work and a lot less guessing on the part of seasoning. As the shrimp cook, they're going to curl and become firm. Because of the way we're doing this, it's kind of a multi-phasic operation. We're going to cook the shrimp just to the point where they're just done. We don't want them to cook all the way through to hard or well done because we're probably going to be putting them in the oven for just a moment to warm them up before we decorate the plate with the shrimp. Shrimp, as they cook, will become more opaque. They look almost translucent right now, but on one side, if you flip, you'll see that they become more deeply colored, almost like pearl colored. It'll only take another minute or two for them to cook, and then what we're gonna do is transfer them onto a dish, and we're gonna finish them at the last minute in the oven. So we're now gonna take the cubed potatoes that have been sitting in water in the pan and put them right onto the flame. We'll boil them till the potatoes are tender, and then we'll turn that into fresh mashed potatoes. Okay, you've done really well to this point, and now we're heading towards that last hurdle. We've got the shrimp almost prepped. They just need to be warmed in the oven. We have the asparagus already prepared. The potatoes just need to be mashed, but we're gonna do that very last. Now what we're gonna do is focus on getting those steaks to being perfectly done. We have beautiful ribeyes. They are beautifully marbled. They're the most flavorful and tender of the steaks. The filet is a little bit more tender, but it tends to be bland. So dollar for dollar, what I do is I stick with ribeyes, or sometimes I go with a beautiful New York strip. So we've heated the cast iron skillet. This is a beautiful way to pan sear a steak. We're going to season the steak very quickly, and then we're gonna place it into the cast iron skillet. You're gonna take your ribeyes, and we're going to take a little bit of Lowry's garlic salt and a little bit of fresh pepper. We're gonna flip, and we're gonna season the other side the same way. First, we're gonna take a little bit of garlic salt, and then a little bit of ground pepper. And then right into the cast iron skillet. Cast iron is a beautiful way to prepare a steak on the stovetop because the iron has a tendency to create a beautiful crust on the steak. We're gonna let it sit and cook and sear on one side fully before we flip it. Give it about 5 to 7 minutes to flip if you want it to be medium to medium well. If you like your steaks rare to medium rare, it may only need about 2 to 4 minutes to sear on one side. So now we're gonna flip the steaks, and you'll see that beautiful sear that I was talking about. There are tons of ways to cook steaks. You can put them on the grill, you can broil them. If you're going to pan sear them in your house, try to use cast iron skillets because you're gonna get the most amount of flavor and a perfectly done crust on the steak. Now after a few more moments, we're now ready to take the steaks off. What you're gonna do is you're gonna let them sit for about 4 to 5 minutes before we cut and serve. That'll allow the flavors of the steaks and the moisture in the steak to redistribute throughout the entire steak. Now we're ready to do the mashed potatoes. Steaks are done, shrimp is done, asparagus is done, and the onions and the mushrooms are ready to go. All that we're gonna do now is mash the potatoes, and then we're ready to assemble the meal. Are you ready? So we have the potatoes, and they're boiled all the way through. They're ready to be mashed. All we're going to do is we're gonna add the rest of that stick of butter to the potatoes, and we're gonna add about 2 or 3 ounces of milk. We're gonna begin to mash by hand. Now they may seem a little runny to start. They will start thickening up in just a minute or two, but you wanna make sure that they blend smooth. Once the potatoes are blended very smooth and they're ready to be given a minute to rest, we're gonna add in the seasoning that we're gonna use to make the potatoes perfect. I like to use a little bit of Lowry's garlic seasoned salt. It's okay to put a little bit more in than you think you need because potatoes will absorb all of the sodium put into them and leave it with a much more mild flavor. And then a little bit of pepper. And then just make sure that they're mixed evenly. And then the next step is plating. now comes the moment you've all been waiting for. We're gonna plate. So the main thing is composition. You want something that's beautiful to look at, but something that displays everything with its own light. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the mashed potatoes, and we're gonna give a nice large portion. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna fan out some of the asparagus. We're gonna plate the steaks. We're gonna place the shrimp. And last, we're gonna decorate with a little bit of the caramelized onions and the burgundy sauteed mushrooms. And ladies and gentlemen, it's ready to serve. We're ready to eat, and I'd like to let you know that to me, the essence of romance is the amount of time and energy that you put into preparing the perfect experience for the other person. What we have for you is a beautiful ribeye steak with a little bit of seasoning, topped with burgundy sauteed mushrooms and caramelized onions, with a little bit of shrimp scampi, fresh herbed asparagus, and a little bit of mashed potatoes. We're going to serve it with the Beringer's Founder's Estate Pinot Noir that we use to make the mushrooms, which is a light-bodied red with a little bit of plum and cherry and a little bit of spice and roasted nuts, which should be a beautiful pair for this dish. Now the goal was to prepare a meal for two for $35 or less. We actually came in at about $29 with everything that we used. It leaves us about $6 to play with on our budget, which means you can go and get a little bit of ice cream or maybe a little something sweet to have at the end of your meal. A meal like this in a restaurant would probably be about $50 a plate, with a bottle of wine that would be in the realm of $30, meaning that the meal without a tip is $130, delivered to you at home for about $29. Bon appetit, and we'll see you again next week on Fresh Food Therapy.